The candle was already burning when I pulled into the driveway, that soft, amber glow shining through the dusty front window like it had been waiting all this time. The porch steps groaned when I touched them, the same way they did when I was a child sneaking out before dawn. But when I pressed my palm against the front door, something colder than night washed over me. The kind of cold that doesn't come from weather, but from absence. That house had been empty for years. At least, that's what I told myself before I turned the knob. I hadn't planned on stopping. Truth is, I had driven past this house at least 10 times over the years, each time telling myself I didn't need to see it again. That childhood was over. Those people were gone. And whatever pieces I left behind here, well, they could stay buried. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way the sky looked, thick clouds bruised with purple like they were holding back a storm. Or maybe it was the quiet. That kind of quiet that makes you feel watched, even when no one's around. I slowed the car just enough to catch a glimpse of the window, and there it was. That candle. Mama used to keep one on the windowsill for each of us kids, a soft little beacon. Lit meant come home. Unlit meant stay where you are until I call for you. 17 years had passed, and no one had lived in this house since Mama left for the hospital. Yet there it was, glowing gently, as steady as it had the night I ran from this place. My breath caught somewhere between memory and fear. I should have kept driving. But some doors, especially the old ones, always know how to call you back. The porch boards bent under my shoes the way tired old bones bend under a lifetime of secrets. I kept my eyes on that candle, its light shaking slightly behind the glass. Not enough to be real flame, more like a pulse, almost human. I raised my hand and knocked. Once, twice, the way Mama taught us to knock before entering anyone's space. Silence. The kind that folds around you and makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. My fingers curled around the knob. It was cool in a way metal gets when no hand has touched it in too long. When the door finally opened, a smell drifted out, dust, old pine floors, that faint whisper of something forgotten. Not rot, not decay, just emptiness. I stepped inside. The candle flickered against the window pane, painting the room in long, trembling shadows. Everything felt familiar, but hollowed out like the shell of a place, not the home I remembered. My footsteps echoed in a way they never used to. Mama always said a house full of people doesn't echo, only empty ones do. And this one echoed back at me like it had been waiting to speak. I stood still long enough for the quiet to settle, like dust landing on an untouched book. Then I noticed it. The flame didn't move like fire. It didn't dance. It hummed with the soft rhythm of something battery-powered. A timer candle. My chest tightened. Someone had been here recently. Someone who knew where Mama kept them. Someone who knew the meaning behind that window light. I moved closer, each step loosening memories I'd kept tied down for years. Mama lighting the candle when my brother stayed out late. Mama setting one out the night Daddy left and said he wasn't sure when he'd be back. Mama touching my cheek and saying, "If you ever can't find your way home, look for the light." My fingers brushed the candle's base. Warm plastic, fresh batteries, not dusty at all. Whoever set this here hadn't done it long ago. A soft creak came from somewhere deeper in the house, faint, like old wood yawning. But in a house that had been empty for nearly 2 decades, the sound felt too alive. I held my breath, listening. Silence swallowed the room again, cleanly, almost politely. Still, something wasn't right. A house forgets you over the years. This one remembered. I stepped back toward the doorway, eyes still on the candle burning in the glass. Outside, the wind shifted just enough to rattle a loose shutter. The sound made me shiver, not from cold, but from knowing the world outside had changed, while this house stayed suspended in the moment I left. I told myself I'd give it one more minute, just enough to breathe, just enough to make sure no one else was here. The candle's glow steadied, almost stubborn, like it didn't care who lit it. But I cared. Because if no one lived here, and Mama was long gone, Who came back to my childhood home, and what were they calling me toward? When I stepped over the threshold, the air hit me first. Heavy, unmoving, the way air gets in places that haven't heard a voice in years. It clung to my skin like old breath, like the room itself exhaled after holding it in too long. White sheets draped over the furniture, soft shapes in the dim glow of that candle still burning in the window. Everything looked paused, mid-sentence, mid-gesture. I whispered, "Mama." Not because I expected an answer, but because the silence felt too thick to walk through alone. I took a few steps deeper into the living room, the floorboards murmuring under my weight. Mama used to say wood remembers people, every step, every stumble, every angry packing night. If that was true, this floor knew me better than I knew myself. The sheet covering the old sofa had gathered dust at the edges, the kind that turns gray when time sits too long. I paused beside it and pressed my palm down gently, imagining the cushions sinking like they used to when Mama sat with her Bible or Daddy with his boots still on. The corners of the room had grown their own little forests, cobwebs stretching up like fine lace. Not neglected, just untouched. There was something unnerving about that. Neglect has chaos. This had order. As if someone tended to the dust the way one tends a grave, quietly, consistently, without intention of fixing anything. I let my fingers drift across the mantel. The layer of dust was even, uninterrupted except for one faint line where something had been moved recently. Something Mama once kept displayed. The absence felt louder than the silence. Behind me, the candle hummed softly, a gentle glow cutting through the dimness, steady in a house that hadn't known steadiness in 17 years. Someone had meant for it to be seen. I walked toward the small table by the far wall, the one where Mama used to keep our school pictures. My siblings and I smiling stiffly, hair combed, clothes ironed, little snapshots of a life we pretended was simpler than it was. A single frame lay face down on the wood. My breath caught. It wasn't the dust or the way the frame's corner pressed a faint mark into the tabletop. It was the intention. Frames fall in storms, in fights, in accidents. But this one hadn't fallen. Someone placed it face down. Someone who didn't want the picture seen. I hesitated before reaching for it. My fingers brushed the cool metal edge, lifting it slowly. The faint squeak of the hinge, that tiny hinge meant for folding stands, sounded too loud in the stillness. A photo of me stared back. Younger, softer, before the leaving, before the silence. In the picture, Mama's hand rested on my shoulder. Not heavy, just enough to anchor me. I studied the glass, noticing a faint fingerprint smeared across the bottom corner. Not mine. Not Mama's. She always cleaned frames before displaying them. Someone had touched this recently. Held it. Turned it over. But why hide it afterward? I set the photo down slowly and stood there, letting the weight of the moment settle into my bones. The electric candle glowed behind me, casting soft shadows that shifted as if breathing. I turned toward it, drawn again by its steadiness. A timer candle, predictable, loyal, lighting up night after night with no audience. Mama had only used them during storms, when the power flickered, and she didn't want us stumbling in the dark. But Mama wasn't here. And the house had been vacant for years. Someone had come back. To turn this candle on. To place it in the window. To face down a photo of me. I knelt beside the small wooden stand where the candle rested. The batteries inside were new, that much I could feel from the warmth along its base. I checked the timer on the side, set for 7 p.m. Someone wanted this house to glow tonight. Someone wanted the signal lit. A welcome signal, yes, but Mama's signals were always layered. Lit could mean come home, but it could also mean someone is missing. And sometimes, on the nights Daddy didn't return, it meant something's wrong. I closed my eyes. The silence pressed in again, thick and watchful. A faint creak drifted through the hallway, not enough to be footsteps, but enough to feel like the house clearing its throat. I straightened slowly, one hand on the table, steadying myself. The candle flickered once, a gentle blink of light against the glass. It wasn't fear that rose in me, not yet. Just a quiet, uneasy knowing. Someone had been here. Not long ago. Long enough to disturb a picture, wipe at the frame, and set a false flame in the window like an invitation that wasn't meant for strangers. I let my gaze wander across the dim room, taking in every shadow the candle could not reach. Who lit the signal this time? And what exactly were they asking me to walk into? The hallway stretched out before me like an old photograph, long, narrow, faded at the edges. The kind of place where sound doesn't just travel, it lingers. The moment my foot touched the first board, the floor let out a soft groan, the kind that sends a quiet ripple through your chest. I froze, listening. There was no wind inside the house, yet something cold brushed against my ankle, like a memory passing by. Down at the far end, my childhood bedroom door stood slightly open. That thin line of darkness between the frame and the wood felt like an invitation I didn't remember accepting. I took a slow step forward. The sound echoed, a deep, hollow tone that didn't belong to a house with people. Houses without people exaggerate everything. Even a breath feels like it's trying too hard. The wallpaper on the left side had cracked open, curling away from the baseboards. Beneath the peeling layer, I could see flashes of the older pattern Mama used to love, tiny blue flowers trailing in quiet loops, a design she said reminded her of small joys. She never replaced it by choice. She replaced it because Daddy insisted modern homes shouldn't look old-fashioned. Mama's joy ended up buried under paper and paint. Funny how the old flowers outlived them both. As I walked deeper into the hallway, the air turned cooler. Not in the way abandoned houses get cold. This was sharper, as though the temperature dipped only in this one stretch of space. A corridor caught between times. My fingertips drifted along the wall, tracing the places where the wallpaper bubbled, where little nails once held up drawings, report cards, birthday banners. I used to run through this hallway barefoot, the floor thudding beneath me, Mama calling, "Slow down before you slip." Now, even my softest steps felt like intrusions. Halfway down the hall, I heard something faint, a ringing echo of something I couldn't place. A child's laugh, a whisper of air slipping through the walls, or just my memory tripping over itself. The hallway had always been a place of transitions. When I was small, it led from the chaos of the living room to the quiet of our bedrooms. When I was older, it was where Daddy's voice carried when he was angry, where Mama's sobs trembled in the dark, where I learned to walk without sound. I slowed as I approached the last few feet. My old door, the one with the chipped white paint and the faded sticker of a sun in the corner, stood open just enough to show a sliver of the room beyond. Light didn't spill out from inside. It felt like the room was holding its breath. A cold draft slipped through the gap, brushing my skin in a way that made goosebumps rise instantly. That draft shouldn't exist. The window in my old room didn't open well, and the house had been sealed tight for years. My heart beat steady, but low, like it didn't want to be noticed. With each step forward, that thin shadow between door and frame widened, forming a dark seam that tugged at something deep inside me, a memory I couldn't reach but could feel. I stopped just inches from the door. My hand hovered close, not quite touching it. The wood looked the same as it did when I was a child, scuffed, tired, but stubborn enough to stay standing. I listened, really listened. There was nothing. Not silence. Nothing. Nothing is different, it absorbs instead of holds. It doesn't echo, it doesn't hum. And this room, whatever waited in it, held that same strange void. I nudged the door with my fingertips. It swung inward without resistance, opening into a quiet darkness. The cold air slipped around me, sliding under my clothes like winter had been waiting behind that door. My breath fogged faintly in the dim light spilling from the hallway. That shouldn't happen. Not in a house like this. Something tightened in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. The same feeling you get when someone says your name softly in a crowd. I stepped over the threshold, and for a moment, everything felt too still. Too exact. as if the room had been waiting all this time for me to come back. A memory flickered at the edge of my mind. A night I stood in this doorway, hesitant, listening to Mama whisper something through the crack. But the words wouldn't come back to me, not yet. I stayed in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. The outline of my old room slowly emerged, the shape of the bed, the soft slope of the curtain rod. The faint border of where a rug used to lie, everything familiar, everything distant. The hallway behind me creaked again, softly, almost like a step. I didn't turn around. Not because I wasn't curious, but because some memories only rise when you're looking forward, not back. The cold draft touched my neck once more, gentle but insistent. Whatever memory waited for me in this room. It had been locked away long enough. And now it wanted to be seen. The moment I stepped inside, the air folded around me, thick, unmoving, like the room had been holding its breath for 17 years and finally let it out. Nothing had changed. Not the blue curtains that never quite reached the floor. Not the scuffed dresser with the drawer that stuck halfway. Not even the dust motes drifting lazily through the faint hallway light, like they'd been waiting for me to disturb them. But the stillness felt wrong. Not peaceful, preserved. A room can remember joy, anger, fear. And mine felt like it remembered all three at once. I stood just inside the doorway, letting my eyes wander over the familiar shapes. My bed sat in the same corner, the quilt Mama stitched herself still folded neatly across the foot. The pattern of small green leaves used to comfort me, but now it only reminded me how soft Mama's voice had been the night everything changed. The air in the room felt heavier than anywhere else in the house, as though every breath had to work its way around old memories still hanging in the corners. I could almost hear the faint echo of a younger me humming to herself, trying to drown out the arguments drifting from down the hall. I walked toward the dresser, running my fingers along its surface. The wood felt cool, not dusty, untouched in a way that made me pause. Someone had wiped it recently, not thoroughly, just enough to remove fingerprints. My gaze drifted to the wall beside the dresser, to the small vertical crack I used to treat like a treasure box. I'd slip folded notes inside whenever I felt scared, angry, or simply too unsure to speak aloud. Mama once told me the walls don't talk, but they hold everything you give them. Tonight, that felt truer than ever. I knelt beside the wall, pressing my fingertips gently along the narrow crack. It hadn't widened, hadn't shifted. Age should have changed it, but it looked exactly as it did when I last touched it at 17. A small corner of paper peeked out yellowed, soft at the edges. My heart dipped. I eased it out slowly, careful not to tear it. The paper was cold, as though it had been sitting against something colder than drywall. I unfolded it, expecting a childish doodle or a line written in a moment of teen heartbreak. But the handwriting wasn't childish. It was mine, but shakier than I remembered. The letters leaned unevenly, like my hand hadn't been steady. And the message: "Don't trust him." Just those 3 words. No name. No explanation. I stared at the note, feeling a faint tremor in my fingertips. Deep inside, a memory quivered, a night I didn't want to revisit. A night Mama lit the candle for me, even though I wasn't missing, even though I was right there in this room, shivering under the quilt. She stepped into the doorway with her robe tied tight, whispering that everything was all right. But her eyes told a different story. Fear, urgency, a question she didn't dare ask out loud. Maybe the note wasn't for her. Maybe it was for me. I read the note again, slower this time. My throat tightened. A strange memory flickered, the soft creak of someone packing the hallway outside my door, long after midnight. I remembered pressing my ear against the quilt, listening to muffled voices. Mama whispering, Daddy insisting, the low rumble of someone else, someone I couldn't place. The house always held secrets after dark. But that night, the darkness itself felt like a secret. I closed my eyes, trying to reach for the missing pieces. I remembered Mama lighting the candle in the window, her hands trembling. I remembered her pulling me close without a word, smoothing my hair with a gentleness that felt like an apology. But what had happened before that? Who had I been afraid of? Why had I needed to warn myself? My fingers closed around the note. The ink was smudged slightly, as though it had been touched by damp fingertips or tears. It didn't feel like the kind of message a child writes in passing. It felt urgent, desperate. Someone had been in this room with me that night. Someone who shouldn't have been. I opened my eyes and looked around. The quilt, the curtains, the dresser, everything frozen exactly as I left it. But the silence felt heavier now. Dense, watchful, as though the room wasn't just remembering. It was waiting for me to remember too. I stood, holding the note loosely in my hand, the words trembling in the dim light. A cold draft brushed the back of my neck, softer than before, almost like a breath. I turned slightly, unsure if I expected to see someone standing behind me or just my own shadow. Nothing moved. But the air felt different now, tight, charged. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever truth hid behind those words, it had been buried for years. But the room knew. The house knew. And now I'd been reminded. I stepped back into the doorway, heart unsteady, eyes drifting down the hall. If I had warned myself not to trust him, then who was walking these halls the night Mama lit the candle for me? The living room felt different now, like the air had grown thicker since I left my bedroom. The candle's faint glow barely reached the corner where Mama's old secretary desk sat, its dark wood catching only slivers of light. I walked toward it slowly, the quiet stretching thin around me. The desk hadn't changed. The small brass handles, the tiny keyhole we never had a key for, the drawer that always stuck. When I tugged it gently, the drawer refused to move, just like it used to. Stubborn, guarded. Mama called it her listening drawer. The one that held her secrets. And tonight, it felt like it wanted to speak. I crouched beside the desk, brushing dust from the top. The wood was smooth in places, worn in others. A map of years spent writing checks, signing permission slips, writing letters she never mailed. Mama always sat here with her shoulders pulled in, like she was trying to make herself smaller to fit the weight she carried. The drawer handle was cool under my fingers. I tried gently, the way any old piece of furniture asks to be treated. It stayed firm. I pulled harder, it didn't budge. A familiar frustration stirred in my chest, the same feeling I had as a teenager, watching Mama struggle with it while she whispered. This drawer got a mind of its own. But Mama had a trick. A quiet little lift, just enough to shift the weight, then a pull. I slid my hand beneath the edge, lifted and tugged. A soft click broke the silence. The drawer slid open, with surprising ease, like it had been waiting for someone who knew how to coax it awake. Inside, dust lay in gentle ripples along the edges, but the contents at the center were clear. A stack of letters tied with twine, some edges curled, others stained by time. And on top, my name, written in Mama's trembling script. I lifted the top letter carefully. The envelope crackled beneath my touch, its paper thin, almost translucent. My name, full name, middle and all, looked strange after all these years. Mama only wrote it that way when she meant to be serious, when what followed wasn't meant to be said lightly. The seal was unbroken. She had written it, addressed it, and never sent it. My throat tightened. I opened it slowly, afraid the paper might tear. Her handwriting drifted unevenly across the page, familiar loops, but shakier, like her hand had been trembling or she'd been writing in low light. Some words slanted downward, others pressed too hard into the paper. My sweet girl. It started the way she always started serious things. But the next line made me sit back on my heels. I need you to know the truth before I go. Before I go. Not before I send this. Not before you come home. Before she left this house. Before she disappeared into that final night. The letter went on, sentences woven with fear and softness, circling around something she struggled to name. She wrote about keeping us safe, about mistakes that piled up like stones, about someone in the house she no longer trusted, someone she didn't dare confront. But she never wrote his name. Not once. My hands shook slightly as I read the next line, one that looked darker, pressed into the paper as if Mama's hand slipped or her fear grew heavier. If anything happens to me, it won't be because of chance. My breath caught. Below it, the ink thinned out, the letters uneven, like she'd paused, like someone was nearby. I should have told you sooner. I should have told all of you. But fear makes a woman quiet in ways that don't feel like silence. I heard the house settle around me, a soft groan, a faint tap somewhere upstairs. Not enough to frighten me, but enough to remind me I wasn't imagining the weight of the moment. The letter ended abruptly. No signature, no final line, just a half-written sentence at the bottom. He wasn't who you thought. It trailed off, as though the pen had been yanked away, or as if she'd heard something that stopped her cold. My heart thudded, a slow, deliberate beat. Mama never let us see her fear. Not fully. Not until the day the ambulance took her from this house, and someone else locked the door behind her. I held the letter closer, reading the truncated last line again, trying to hear her voice inside the unfinished thought. Who had she feared? And why write this for me, only to hide it where I might never find it? I slipped the letter back into its envelope, the paper whispering like a breath that had waited too long. The other letters sat beneath it, bound tight, their secrets sealed in the quiet darkness of the drawer. I didn't open them. Not yet. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer, as though the house itself had exhaled a truth it had held for years. I set the envelope on the desk, my fingers lingering on Mama's trembling handwriting. If she had tried to confess something, if she had feared someone enough to write this, then the question wasn't just who she meant. It was why she never got to finish that last line. And what or who stopped her? The knock didn't sound like much, just a soft tap-tap, barely enough to stir the stillness of the house. But in a place that hadn't heard human footsteps in years, it landed like a shout. I froze beside Mama's desk, the half-open drawer still breathing its secrets into the air. Another tap followed, slower this time. Cautious. For a moment, I wondered if the house itself had made the sound, wood shifting, time settling. But then a familiar voice floated in from the porch, thin and quivering with age. Hello, anyone in there? Mrs. Dillard. The neighbor who used to bring peach cobbler when Mama fell sick. I hadn't expected her to still be here, much less knocking on this door. I moved toward the front of the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sound of my footsteps followed me down the hallway, echoing against the walls like someone else was walking just a breath behind. The candle in the window flickered as I passed, as if the draft of old memories had brushed by it. When I opened the front door, a cool breeze slipped inside, carrying the scent of night jasmine from somewhere in the yard. And there she was. Mrs. Dillard. Smaller now. Older. Her silver hair tucked under a knitted hat, her cane trembling faintly in her hand. Her eyes widened the moment she saw me standing inside the house. "Oh, good Lord," she whispered, pressing her free hand to her chest. I thought I was seeing a ghost." Her voice held something fragile, relief, confusion, and something else. Something that sounded a lot like fear. I stepped aside to let her in, but she shook her head. "No, baby, I can't come in. Haven't set foot in that house since the night your mama left it." She peered past me, scanning the dim living room, the candle, the shadows stretching along the floor. Her jaw tightened. I shouldn't even be this close. She leaned heavily on her cane, eyes darting from the furniture to my face, then back to the candle. "Nobody lived here," she said quietly. "Not since that night. Everyone packed up and left except me. I stayed more out of habit than sense, I suppose." Her gaze drifted toward the second-floor windows, dark and hollow. But these last few days, I felt something off, like the house wasn't empty no more. I swallowed, trying to ease the tightness growing in my throat. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, a long, trembling pause that let the night breeze whisper between us. "I saw someone," she said finally. "Yesterday, late afternoon, thought I imagined it at first. Tall man, broad shoulders, moved like he knew the place." My skin prickled. "Did you see his face?" "No," her voice dropped to a hush. "He kept his head down, but he went right up to your mama's window and stood there a long while, like he was waiting for someone." She gripped her cane so tightly her knuckles went pale. "When I called out to him, he didn't answer, just walked around the back and disappeared. I felt the note in my pocket, 'Don't trust him.' I felt Mama's letter unfinished. He wasn't who you thought." The pieces shifted uneasily. Not enough to see the whole picture. Just enough to know something dark moved between them. Mrs. Dillard's eyes softened when she looked back at me. "You shouldn't be here alone," she whispered. "This house, it holds too much, and the past doesn't stay still just because we want it to." I tried to smile, but it came out thin. I just needed to see it again. She shook her head slowly. "No, honey, houses like this don't call you back for no reason. Something brought you here." Her words settled into the doorway like a shadow. I felt the house behind me, felt its heaviness, its watchfulness, as if it had paused to listen. "Mama's things are still here," I said quietly. "Everything untouched." "That's because no one ever came to take them." Her voice quivered. "Your family scattered after that night, never came back, and I only stayed long enough to see them drive away." She looked down the road, as if seeing ghosts walking those same steps. "But yesterday, seeing that man outside your mama's window." She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter. It felt like the past circling back. Silence settled between us, thick and strange. Then she took a step back from the porch, her cane digging into the dirt. "Don't stay too long," she murmured. "Not tonight. The house remembers things you might not be ready to face." She turned, slow but determined, and began the short walk back to her home. The night seemed to swallow her silhouette. I stayed in the doorway long after Mrs. Dillard disappeared behind her own porch light. The quiet tucked itself around me again, not empty, not peaceful, just waiting. Somewhere in the house, a board creaked softly, as if answering the question she left unspoken. I stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind me. The candle's glow spilled across the floor, pulling my gaze toward the room where Mama kept her secrets, the desk full of letters, the unfinished confession trembling in my hands. A man had been here. Someone tall. Someone familiar. And he hadn't come to mourn. He'd come for something else. Who walked through this empty house before me, and what was he looking for? When I stepped back inside, the house felt different, tighter, like the walls had stopped breathing while I was gone and were only now remembering how. The candle flickered faintly in the window, throwing a soft, trembling light across Mama's desk, where the bundle of letters waited. I sat down slowly, the old chair creaking beneath me like it recognized my weight. The first letter lay open on the surface, just where I'd left it, but it felt heavier now, as though Mrs. Dillard's words had soaked into the paper. "If you ever come back and find it lit." Mama's handwriting whispered. "Leave." But I didn't. I loosened the twine around the letters, the knot stiff from years of holding on. They fanned out across the desk, each envelope's edges curled slightly, each one stamped with a date I barely remembered living through. Mama was never a dramatic woman. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry loud. When she feared something, she folded it small and tucked it inside herself where none of us could see. These letters were the first time I'd seen her fear spelled out in ink, uneven, trembling, pressed so hard into paper the words nearly carved themselves through. The second letter mentioned my father, in a way Mama never did aloud. "He's gone again," she wrote. "2 nights this time. No call, no explanation. Said it was work, but the work he's doing now frightens me more than his absence ever did." My stomach tightened. Mama never let us know when Daddy disappeared. She cover for him, say he was helping a neighbor or stuck at the mill, always offering excuses she didn't believe. But here, In the quiet scratch of her pen, she confessed it plainly. And there was more. He made an agreement with someone. I don't know the details, only the consequences. If anything changes here in the house, if the candle is lit, it won't be a signal for home. I felt the room shift around me. I reached for another letter, this one dated just weeks before Mama left this house for the last time. The ink looked darker, the pressure uneven, like she'd been writing fast. I'm scared of the quiet, baby. Scared of the way he walks through the house now, like he's listening for something instead of resting. Scared of the nights he doesn't speak. Scared of how he comes home smelling like cold metal and worry. My throat tightened as I read. I don't know who he made that agreement with, but he's not the same man I married. I see it in his eyes. Something following him home, and I don't think it's a person. I swallowed hard. She wrote about hearing him leave after midnight, the sound of the back door locking, the low rumble of a car engine too new to be his. She wrote about the mornings when he returned with shaking hands. And then, near the bottom of the letter, if you ever come back and find the candle lit, leave immediately. It's not for you. It's not for any of us. It's a warning. A warning. Not a welcome. My fingers trembled as I let the paper fall back to the desk. The candle in the window flickered again, its glow shifting just enough to stretch the shadows across the floor like long fingers. I picked up one more letter, the last one with a complete page. The handwriting was less steady, the sentences shorter, as if Mama had been hurrying against time. He thinks I don't know, but I hear him on the phone late at night, whispering, using my name in ways that frighten me. There's someone he owes, someone he's trying to appease. A chill slipped down my spine. This wasn't the voice of the woman who raised us with gentle certainty. This was a woman writing from the shadowed edge of fear. If anything happens to me, don't believe it was chance. I've made my peace with whatever comes, but I can't make peace with the idea of him involving you in it. The bottom corner of the paper was smudged, maybe from tears, maybe from hurried fingers. If the candle is lit, it means someone's come back to settle what he started, and I need you far from here when that day comes. I stared at those words until the room blurred. Someone's come back. Someone tall. Someone familiar. Just like Mrs. Dillard had said. I set the letter down slowly. My heartbeat was loud in the quiet, steady, but uneasy. Mama wrote this warning for me. So why, after reading it, was I still sitting in this house? I leaned back in the chair, letting the truth settle into my bones like cold air. The candle glowed softly across the room, its false flame steady, unwavering. Not a beacon of safety, but a sign of danger. Mama had tried to protect me with ink and paper. With unfinished confessions. With a simple flame meant to keep me away. I looked toward the dark hallway, the shadows stretching long and thin. Someone had been here, recently. Someone who knew Mama's signal. Someone connected to whatever agreement my father made before the night everything fell apart. I should have left. Mama asked me to leave. So why did I stay? And what exactly was I waiting to find? Night came quietly, slipping into the house the way fog slides over water, soft, unannounced, inevitable. The candle's glow grew dimmer as darkness filled the corners first, then the walls, then the spaces between my breaths. I sat at Mama's desk, the letters spread around me like fallen leaves, when a sound rose through the ceiling, a soft, weight-shifting creak. Not the house settling, not the wood sighing. A footstep, right above me. My breath caught in my throat. No one had lived here in years. And I hadn't taken a single step upstairs. The candle flickered once, as if it, too, felt the shift in the air. I stayed absolutely still, my hand hovering over Mama's unfinished letter as the sound settled into the silence again. The whole house grew alert around me, as if holding its breath. I clicked off my flashlight before instinct could talk me out of it. Darkness closed in, thick and complete, but it felt safer than letting the light announce where I sat. Another creak followed, slower this time, dragging slightly. The kind of step a person makes when they're trying to be quiet, but not quiet enough. My mind raced through possibilities I didn't want to consider. Mrs. Dillard had mentioned a man. Tall, familiar. But familiar didn't always mean safe. The footsteps shifted again, crossing the upstairs, landing the way someone might walk while thinking, or worrying, or lying. There was a rhythm to it, one I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades. A pattern of packing I used to wake up to when Daddy couldn't sleep, or when he didn't want Mama to know he wasn't telling the truth. That memory brushed the air with something cold. Was it him? Or just the sound of an old fear waking up in my bones? Another footstep. Closer now. I slipped from the chair quietly, careful not to disturb the letters. My bare feet touched the cold wood, grounding me in the moment. The candle's dim glow cast long, trembling shadows across the living room floor, each one shifting like a signal. I pressed my back gently against the wall beside the desk, tilting my head to listen. The footsteps paused, then resumed slower, heavier. Whoever it was, they weren't wandering. They were moving with purpose. The floorboards above me creaked in a line left to right to left, packing. A habit. A memory. A man trying to figure out what to do next. A sudden realization tightened my chest. Whoever was up there knew this house. This wasn't the clumsy thud of someone exploring an abandoned building or a stranger poking around. It was the familiar sliding step of someone tracing old paths in the dark, foot by foot, like muscle memory. I swallowed hard. My mouth tasted like metal. I reached for the nearest object, Mama's brass letter opener, not because it would help, but because empty hands felt worse. The footsteps stopped directly above me. A long creak. Then silence. The floor seemed to strain under the weight of someone leaning forward. Listening. My heartbeat thudded so loudly, I feared it might echo up the walls. For a few seconds, maybe longer, nothing moved. The quiet pressed against the air so tightly it almost rang in my ears. Then, a single slow step. Not away. Toward the top of the stairs. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness settle me. I remembered being little, lying in bed, hearing that same hesitant step from Daddy as he tried not to wake us after slipping in late. A man torn between guilt and exhaustion. This step sounded the same. Was it really him? Or was my memory filling in the shadows with familiar ghosts? The stairwell groaned under weight. One step, then another. Whoever was descending moved carefully, as though unsure what waited below me or something else. My grip tightened around the letter opener. The candle's light trembled, casting bright slashes of gold across the walls. My shadow stretched long and thin behind me, trembling with the flame. The steps reached the middle of the staircase. And for a moment, just a breath, I heard it clearly. The soft scrape of a shoe against wood. A familiar sound. Too familiar. My chest tightened. My body went cold. I whispered into the dark, barely audible even to myself. Daddy. The steps stopped. Silence poured down the staircase, thick as water. Whoever stood there hadn't moved, hadn't breathed loudly enough for me to hear. The candle sputtered once, throwing shadows across the bottom step. I kept my eyes on the darkness, where the stairs curved out of sight. A quiet exhale drifted down, not quite a sigh, not quite a breath, just enough to let me know I wasn't alone in this house. I should have run. Mama told me to leave if the candle was lit. But instead, I took one slow step forward, the letter opener cold in my hand. If someone had come back to finish what started years ago, I needed to know who was standing in the dark above me. I placed my foot on the first stair, barely letting the wood feel my weight. The house was so quiet that even my breath felt like an intrusion. Above me, the darkness waited, thick, unmoving, holding its own kind of breath. Whoever stood on that landing wasn't moving anymore, but I could feel him there, like a presence pressed into the air. A memory wearing skin. I climbed slowly, the letter opener slick in my palm, each step lifting me toward the truth I wasn't sure I wanted. Halfway up, moonlight slipped through the narrow window at the stairs' bend, faint and silvery. Enough to show the outline of a man leaning against the wall. Tall, slouched, waiting. At the top of the stairs, I paused. My heart beat low and steady, the way it used to when Daddy lectured us quietly, disappointment layered beneath each word. The air around him felt different, warmer, somehow almost familiar. He didn't speak at first, just breathed, slow and deep, like he was gathering the courage to lift his eyes. When he finally stepped forward, the moonlight caught his face just enough for me to recognize the outline, the sharpness of his jaw, the tired slope of his shoulders, the way he carried regret like an extra weight on his bones. "Daddy," I whispered, more breath than voice. He nodded once, an almost imperceptible dip of his head. His hands hung loosely at his sides, but I could see tension in them, a faint tremor. A man bracing for impact. "I didn't expect you," he said, his voice rough, frayed at the edges. "Not tonight, not after everything." The word everything held too many ghosts, too many nights, too much silence. I lowered the letter opener slightly, though I didn't put it down. Not yet. He seemed to understand. And that understanding hurt more than fear ever could. My father's eyes, once sharp and steady, now looked hollow, rings of exhaustion shadowing the edges. His clothes were worn, his hair threaded with gray, his posture that of a man who'd lost more battles than he'd won. "I thought I had more time," he whispered. "Thought I could come here, handle things, and leave before you ever found out." I swallowed hard. Found out what? He looked away, his gaze drifting down the dark hallway. "About your mama, about me, about the things I should have said a long time ago." The floor beneath him creaked as he shifted, the sound reverberating through the walls like an old memory shaking loose. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Not tonight, not with the candle lit." The words hit me like cold water. Mama said the candle was a warning. She was right. He rubbed a hand across his face, a gesture I hadn't seen since I was a child, the gesture of a man cornered by truth. "I came back to fix what I broke," he murmured. "But it's too late now. Someone else is someone tied to that old agreement. He's already been here. He's looking for something, and he won't stop until he finds it." My pulse thudded. What agreement? Daddy's shoulders slumped, as if the question pressed years of weight on him. "That's the part I never told your mama. The part that cost her everything." I stepped closer, the shadows shifting around us. My father lifted his eyes to meet mine, and for a moment I saw the man he used to be, the man who carved wooden toys for us, who taught me how to fix a bike chain, who kissed Mama's cheek when he thought no one was watching. But behind that version of him was another man entirely. A man consumed by guilt. He exhaled shakily. "I tried to get out of it. I did. But when you make a deal with someone who doesn't forget, you spend the rest of your life running." My stomach tightened. "This person, the one who came to the house yesterday." He nodded. "He's tied to it. He wants what I owe." "And what do you owe?" His voice cracked. "Your mama's silence." The hallway went still, like the house itself had paused to listen. "What happened that night?" I whispered. He pressed a hand against the wall, steadying himself. The moonlight trembled on his face. "Mama learned the truth," he said, "about what I did, about who I owed, and she threatened to leave to take all of you away from this life." He closed his eyes. "And that same night, that man came to the house. He didn't leave until Mama promised to keep quiet." He looked at me, finally, fully. I wasn't the man who saved her. I was the reason she needed saving. The silence pressed in around us, thick and unmoving. Daddy's confession hung in the air like dust suspended in moonlight, visible, heavy, impossible to ignore. I stood there, frozen between who I used to believe he was and who he truly had been. He took a slow step toward me, stopping just before the light reached his eyes. "I didn't expect you to return," he said. Not after everything I put this family through. My breath trembled. Why now, Daddy? Why come back tonight? He swallowed. Because the man who came before you, he's not done yet. And if you're here, that means everything I tried to bury is rising again. His voice broke. I've been guarding the truth for years, but now it's coming for us both. The hallway felt smaller now, as if the walls had crept inward to listen. Moonlight traced the edges of my father's face, sharpening the lines time had carved into him. His shadow stretched behind him like something separate, a darker version of the man I thought I knew. He inhaled, slow and broken, as though the truth was something that scraped his ribs on the way up. Mama lit the candle that night, he said. His voice didn't echo. It simply fell between us, heavy and final. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a confession. It was an unraveling. I leaned against the banister, my fingers cold against the wood. My father stood just a few steps away, yet it felt like there were miles of years, silence, and unspoken things between us. He looked down the hallway, not at me, but at some memory lodged deep inside these walls. She lit it because she was leaving, he said quietly. She finally decided she'd had enough. The words hit me harder than I expected. Mama leaving. She'd never said a word. She stayed through storms, through arguments whispered like threats, through nights when Daddy vanished without explanation. He kept talking, his voice trembling. She was packing. I came home early, found the suitcase on the bed, her clothes folded. The image carved itself into my mind, Mama's hands folding her Sunday dress, her quiet resolve, her heart probably pounding. She told me she couldn't keep living like this. She told me she knew what I'd done, and she said she was taking you kids away. My breath quivered in my chest. The walls felt closer, listening harder. And then, I whispered. He closed his eyes. And then I lost my temper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. But something in his breathing changed, a tremor deeper than sound. I didn't hit her. I swear to you I didn't. His hands lifted slightly, palms open, as if begging the darkness to believe him. We argued, he continued. Loud enough that the neighbors probably heard, loud enough that she stumbled backward, lost her balance. He swallowed hard. That's all it took. She struck her head on the corner of the dresser. I'll never forget the sound. My knees went weak. I gripped the railing to stay upright. She was breathing barely. I called for an ambulance, but I couldn't stay. The shame in his voice made the air feel colder. I locked the house, walked out the door, drove until the road disappeared behind me. I stared at him, unable to move. You just left. I couldn't face what happened, couldn't face you, couldn't face anyone. His voice broke then, the first crack since I was a child. So every year, he said, on the date she died, I came back. I lit the candle. I thought maybe if I kept that light burning, I could punish myself enough to make it mean something. The truth settled between us like dust, slowly, stubbornly, refusing to be brushed away. The candle, the symbol of home, of safety, of Mama's gentle ways, had been twisted into something else entirely. A reminder of the night she tried to leave. A beacon of guilt. A yearly ritual of a man who couldn't bury his past. I didn't know how to tell you, he whispered. Didn't know how to be your father after that. Every time I thought of coming home, I saw her lying there, and I saw you, small, crying, confused. I felt something inside me splinter. Anger. Sadness. A strange ache that didn't know where to settle. You let me grow up thinking she died at the hospital, I said. You let me think it was sudden. He nodded, tears finally lifting the shine in his eyes. I let you think a lot of things, because I was a coward, and because I thought the truth would destroy you. His voice grew soft, softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't come tonight to be forgiven. I came because I thought the man from the past was coming after me, and I didn't want you to be caught in the middle. My breath trembled. So what am I supposed to do with all this? He met my gaze fully, without looking away. I don't know, but it's yours now. The truth is yours, whether you wanted it or not. The candle's light flickered down the hallway, its glow thin and wavering now, no longer a symbol of safety or home, but of everything broken and unfinished. I stood there, clutching the railing, feeling the weight of my father's confession settle into my bones. The truth didn't free me. It didn't comfort me. It simply changed everything I thought I knew. My father stood in the moonlit shadow, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Haunted, worn, waiting to see if the truth would finally break us both. I drew a slow breath, the house holding it with me. What was I supposed to do now? With the truth that had been buried under a lit candle for 17 years. Dawn crept into the house the way forgiveness sometimes does, slowly, hesitantly, touching only the edges before it dares to reach the center. The darkness thinned, shadows softened. And for the first time since I returned, the house didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It felt emptied, unburdened. The candle's weak glow flickered in the soft morning light, no longer able to compete. It looked small now, a tiny imitation flame that had spent 17 years pretending to be meaningful. I walked toward it, each step steady, each breath my own. It was time. The house felt different now, lighter, as though the walls themselves had finally exhaled after carrying years of secrets and guilt. Every corner of the living room seemed softer, less sharp, as if the truth had been a weight pressing everything inward, and now it had eased its grip. My father stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame the way a man leans when he isn't sure he deserves to stand on his own. His eyes followed me quietly, not demanding, not pleading, just present, painfully, humanly present. The candle, still in the window, hummed with a faint battery buzz. Its plastic flame quivered like it wasn't sure how to die out. I touched the base, feeling the warmth of the bulb. For so long, this light had been a symbol to me of home, of mama, of safety, of belonging. But now I saw it for what it truly was. A warning. A confession. A wound. I wrapped my fingers around it gently, lifting it from the window ledge. It was lighter than I expected. Everything felt lighter than I expected. My father lowered his gaze. He knew what turning it off meant. It wasn't just ending the ritual. It was ending the story the house had been forced to tell on repeat. I set the candle on the table beside Mama's letters, her handwriting a soft, trembling contrast to the quiet plastic glow beside it. My father shifted, his breath catching faintly. I used to think, if I kept that thing lit, maybe I could somehow undo what happened. His voice was low, gravel worn thin. And did you? I asked. He shook his head. No, I only kept the wound open. For me, for this house, for you. I studied him, the exhaustion in his jawline, the regret in his posture, the years of running etched into the slouch of his shoulders. He looked older than I remembered, but he also looked real for the first time. A faint breeze slipped through a crack in the wall. The candle flame flickered. 17 years of rituals. 17 years of memory. 17 years of a truth buried behind plastic light. This candle was never for me, I murmured. No, he said softly. It was for her, and then it became for me a punishment, a reminder. I pressed the tiny switch under the base. A small click. The flame blinked. And then it went dark. Silence followed, not the heavy kind from before. A clean kind. A kind that waited gently for whatever came next. The room felt different again, lighter still, as though shutting off the candle had let something long-trapped escape. Maybe it was Mama. Maybe it was my father's guilt. Maybe it was just the simple truth settling into the floorboards, no longer needing shadows to hide in. I turned toward him. He looked smaller somehow, relieved, ashamed, and unsure all at once. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. I don't know how to make any of this right. I didn't either. But I knew one thing. Leaving the candle lit had kept us frozen. Turning it off was the first step toward letting life move again. You can start by not running anymore, I said. His eyes softened with a grief I couldn't name. Are you staying? I let the question settle. It didn't feel like pressure, just possibility. I'm leaving this house, I said, but I'm not leaving the truth. He nodded slowly, absorbing each word like something precious and painful. I'm sorry, he whispered. For once, it didn't sound like a plea. Just a truth. Simple, human. We stood there a long moment, the morning stretching across the floor like a quiet blessing neither of us deserved but both of us needed. I took one last look around the living room, at the desk where Mama wrote her warnings, at the hallway where shadows once echoed with footsteps, at the window that had held a false flame for far too long. Then I opened the front door. Morning air drifted in, cool and forgiving. I stepped outside, leaving the house behind me, its window finally dark. My father stayed in the doorway, his silhouette soft in the rising light. I didn't know what we would become, two broken people holding pieces of a story too big for either of us. But one thing was certain. The candle no longer defined me. The past no longer owned me. If the flame was never truly for me, maybe it was time to become someone who no longer needed it at all.